We all want to feel supported in whatever it is that we're passionate about, even if it's being the WWE champion. But unfortunately, the WWE itself doesn't seem to always follow that philosophy, at least not for everybody. Like who, you ask? Well, they're the topic of this episode, because today... A big thank you to all of my wonderful Patreon supporters such as Inigo Montoya, Dakari Garment, and Rodney Harris. Thank all of you for the support, as it really does mean a lot. Alright, allow me to start by saying that support can be a rather tricky thing to try and define, especially since we're not backstage in WWE and we don't know what's going on internally. But that doesn't mean that we can't take a look at things from the fan perspective and see all the things that we look for when it comes to showing signs of support. Now, all the criteria for this will be laid out throughout the course of this video, but allow me to start by saying that I'm only looking at the WWE Championship for this video. I'm not looking at the Universal Championship or the Big Gold Belt or at any other companies either. And I also want to point out that this has nothing to do with the length of a title reign, as the shortest title reigns is something I've already covered, and you can be supported no matter how long or short your title reign is. Oh, and I also want to say that for the most part, I'm trying to avoid transitional champions, wrestlers who are booked to win the title only to move it from one wrestler to another. For me, I'm looking for wrestlers who were seemingly booked to have a significant title run, but just didn't. No thanks to the help of the WWE. And I also want to be clear, this has nothing to do with how you win the championship or how you lose it. It has to do with the journey in between, regardless of how grand or bad the beginning and ending was. But just keep in mind that everyone's idea of support can vary from person to person, so this is just mine. What are yours? Let me know down in the comments, and also while you're there, if you really want to support this channel, then please make sure you're subscribed and that you give this video a big like. Anyway, with that being said, let's get into the list. Alright, I'm sure this doesn't surprise any of you, but we might as well start with our most recent example. Despite being a champion for over 100 days, holding onto the WWE title from September 13th, 2021 all the way until day 1, January 1st, 2022, Big E Langston never main evented a pay-per-view outside of Survivor Series, which he only did so thanks to him co-main eventing it with, of course, Roman Reigns. Now don't get me wrong, even Brock Lesnar has had entire title runs where he's barely main evented a pay-per-view, but the difference with that is, as I think we can all agree, is that when Brock isn't main eventing a pay-per-view, he still feels like a big deal, where Big E, on the other hand, was treated as more of an afterthought. In fact, his WWE title defense against Drew McIntyre at Crown Jewel was an afterthought, taking place well before the main event of Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar. And then, going back to his match at Extreme Rules, he was in the curtain jerk match, and it wasn't even for the WWE title, as he was part of the New Day as they took on Bobby Lashley, AJ Styles, and Omos. The problem is, as champion, he was never the centerpiece of any major event. He was always playing second fiddle to Roman Reigns. But I guess that's the problem when you have two world championships, which is why most people would agree you really should only have one. Alright, so if barely getting to main event pay-per-views during your title reign isn't bad enough, I say you can also do some damage after a title reign is over. Sometimes, a lack of support can continue happening far into the future after a title reign is even over. Take for instance Bray Wyatt. He was the first wrestler in history to ever go into a WrestleMania as WWE champion and to be left completely off the card the following year despite still being in the company. Just really think about that for a second. And yes, Bray losing the championship to Randy was all part of their major storyline involving the Wyatt family. However, this didn't have to involve the WWE title, and a rumor has it that the only reason why the belt was up for grabs in the first place in this match was because Vince McMahon felt that he owed Orton after he was busted open hard way from Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam. And to make matters worse, many fans were looking forward to Bray Wyatt finally becoming a WWE champion, but as we can see from his entire tenure with WWE, the company just doesn't want to give him a major title for all that long. And also, to make matters worse, we have to remember who he took this title off of. But that leads me to... Alright, Alright, yes, you saw correctly. The title card did say John Cena, but hold on, just hear me out first, okay? Alright, I understand that the notion of John Cena not being supported by WWE as champion seems absolutely ludicrous, but just keep in mind that I'm focusing on individual reigns and not entire careers. And when it comes to John Cena's most recent reign, the record-tying 16th title run, it was sadly anticlimactic. You'd think that the run that tied Ric Flair's record would really be something special and something glorious, but it wasn't. He won it without any real pomp and circumstance, defeating AJ Styles, who didn't really get a whole lot of support for his first title run himself, but just consider that a bonus entry. And then to make matters worse, he dropped the belt to Bray Wyatt soon thereafter. And while I am in favor of Wyatt getting to collect his win back after WrestleMania 30, I thought it should have been done with a little more ceremony than just an Elimination Chamber win. And also, not at the expense of John Cena's 16th title run being so short. I mean, this was the record-tying 16th world title run for John Cena. It should have meant something. It could have been a WrestleMania moment. Well, it didn't really have to happen in the first place, but, you know, if it was going to, it should have at least been done well. Alright, now not long before John Cena won this 16th world title, we have another wrestler who also makes it onto this list. What can I say? This was a really weird time for the belt. When Dean Ambrose became WWE champion, it almost seemed like it was obligatory. After all, Roman Reigns had won it, Seth Rollins had won it, so I guess WWE felt guilty enough to give him the belt, even though it seemed like they didn't really want to. And to prove my point, I have to go back to SummerSlam 2016. This is WWE's biggest party of the summer, and some would say the second biggest pay-per-view after WrestleMania. And where was the WWE champion on this card? Well, he was defending his title against Dolph Ziggler in the 6th match of the show. That's right, it wasn't a main event, it wasn't even a co-main event, it was 6th. The last 2 matches of the night were Seth Rollins versus Finn Balor to crown the inaugural Universal Champion, and we all know how that turned out, which was then followed by the main event, the previously mentioned Brock Lesnar versus Randy Orton match. And this all just goes to show you, by supporting a part-timer, you are effectively not supporting your champion, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a really bad move. Now, allow me to remind everyone this has nothing to do with title length, as you can be supported as a champion no matter if you have a long reign or a short reign. And now, we definitely have a long reign. While Dean Ambrose was screwed out of a main event for SummerSlam, it's definitely not as bad as what happened to CM Punk. During his short title reign, Ambrose at least got to main event most of the pay-per-views where he was champion, where CM Punk on the other hand barely got to main event any, mostly losing out to either Brock Lesnar or John Cena, or both. And that's not even the worst of it, because most famously at this time, CM Punk didn't even get to main event WrestleMania with Chris Jericho. Instead, the last match of the night went to John Cena versus The Rock for their once-in-a-lifetime match, which they would repeat the following year. And interestingly enough, 10 years earlier, Chris Jericho did get the main event, but with Triple H, and they did so over The Rock versus Hulk Hogan. Interesting how that works out, huh? And to make matters worse, The Rock is the one who would take the title off of him. I wonder if this has something to do with the comments he made about the Great One during the pipe bomb. Alright, so now we go from one Paul Heyman guy to another. So many professional wrestling fans were waiting to see Rob Van Dam crowned as the ECW World Champion, although many people also understand how much he elevated the TV title, making his world title run unnecessary. But putting that aside, Rob Van Dam did eventually win the ECW World Championship. However, he did so after it was part of WWE. And while it was really cool to see RVD bring back ECW, let's not forget that this all started when he won the WWE Championship off of John Cena at One Night Stand 2006. And so, while bringing back an entire promotion is definitely pretty cool, it's his title run for the promotion that was already there that's the problem. As WWE Champion, Rob Van Dam never really felt like he belonged holding the belt. And it seemed like WWE didn't think so either, as he lost it in 22 days in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, ECW's hometown. Now, rumor has it that RVD was originally supposed to win the WWE title, only to throw it down a la Shane Douglas and the NWA Championship. And the word is Vince McMahon McMahon caught wind of this and said absolutely not. So instead, RVD became a double champion, at least for a period of time. But don't get me wrong, the focus was definitely on his ECW title reign as it was always supposed to be, and as a WWE champion, they just allowed him to fall by the wayside. And for me, this is a real shame because I say that RVD could have been a main eventer at WrestleMania. He could have been the face of the franchise if only WWE gave him the chance. Alright, so now we have a wrestler who definitely seems like they should be a world champion, but never really feels all that important whenever they are. While I did say that I'm not focusing on entire careers, but rather individual title runs, I have to say, if we were looking at whole careers, The Big Show definitely is a major candidate. While he has won multiple world championships, 2 with the WWE title alone, none of these ever felt all that important. But for today, I'm specifically going to be looking at his second run with the WWF/WWE World Championship, as that's the one he won off of Brock Lesnar. Now, if you remember, at this time, this was the first pinfall loss that Brock ever had, and Show was able to score this thanks to the betrayal of Paul Heyman. Now, you could technically chalk this run up as being a transitional title reign, as both the championship and the services of one Paul Heyman would soon go to Kurt Angle. So while sure, maybe Big Show was used as a plausible threat to end Brock Lesnar's streak, to me it seemed more like they double clutched and decided to go with a mulligan and have Kurt Angle take the spot that Big Show was originally meant to have. I mean, it seems like he always wins the title in grand fashion, but as soon as he does, WWE just seems like they have no idea what to do with him. Speaking of winning the title in grand fashion, here we have one of the grandest ways she could ever first become a world champion, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be supported throughout your entire run. So now we go back to that Chris Jericho title reign that we talked about earlier, where he was the first undisputed champion. Now yes, he did get to main event of WrestleMania with Triple H over that of The Rock and Hogan, but let's not forget that for this storyline, Chris Jericho was little more than Stephanie's dog walker. Despite beating Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock in the same night, for this WrestleMania feud with Triple H, Jericho really served as a background character, with the focus really being between Stephanie and Trips. And furthermore than that, even though he was the first champ, he didn't even get the honor of wearing the undisputed championship title belt, as he instead carried around both the WCW and the WWE's. And I know, there's some out there who will say that holding on to 2 belts is a better visual than just holding on to 1, but I still think it's weird that the first undisputed champion never held on to the undisputed title belt. And now here we have a fan favorite, and as much as it hurts to say, you gotta admit, it doesn't seem like WWE ever really believed in Mick Foley all that much. Now, going back to someone whose world championship career really wasn't anything all that special, we have Mick Foley. Now again, I am going to be focusing on individual runs in particular, but truth be told, we really could pick any one of Foley's, as he somehow never had a successful title defense on television, and his initial winning of the championship was outright disrespected by the competition of WCW on the other channel. And this is the title run that I'll be focusing on specifically for this episode. Now, for those of you who don't remember, the exact episode of Raw where Foley won the championship was pre-recorded, and so WCW decided to use this knowledge to spoil the ending of Monday Night Raw in the hopes of audiences staying on the channel to watch WCW Nitro instead. However, this move completely backfired, as viewers quickly changed the station to see what was going on Raw. And so, while Tony Schiavone sarcastically said that Foley's title win would put butts in seats, it goes to show that Foley really could move the needle. But despite being the man who won the Monday Night War for the WWF, Vince McMahon apparently didn't seem to want to stray off his original path, and that was using Foley as just a middleman to delay The Rock until his WrestleMania feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin could commence. Now yes, this does make Foley something of a transitional champion, but I'm not looking at him in this light for this example, as this is really just a missed opportunity of something they could have done so much more with if they had the confidence to really get behind him. Alright, so let's close with the first chronological entry on this list. While some people would make the argument that WWF never properly backed Macho Man Randy Savage during his first title reign, for this example, I'm looking at his second run with the WWF World title, as this is the reign where it was the first time ever in history where the WWF World Champion did not main event WrestleMania. And while the title wasn't up for grabs during the first WrestleMania, I do want to point out that Hulk Hogan was the champion and he was at least in the main event, even if he wasn't defending the belt. But going back to WrestleMania 8, not only did Macho Man get to wrestle Ric Flair, which definitely was a major match, the actual last match of the night went to Hulk Hogan and Sid Justice, which is something that most of us can agree is nowhere near as good. Now granted, the main event of this show should have been Ric Flair versus Hogan for the championship, but nevertheless, Savage versus Flair is what we got, and we got it unfortunately in the middle of the card. And not only that, let's flash forward to SummerSlam where the Macho Man took on the Ultimate Warrior. Now, you would think that this would be the perfect opportunity for Macho to recollect his win from the Ultimate Warrior after losing to him at WrestleMania 7 and putting him into quote-unquote retirement. But yet again, the Ultimate Warrior would win this match as well, although this time it was via countout. And also, one more time, this wasn't the main event either, as this show was headlined by Bret Hart and the British Bulldog for the Intercontinental Championship. But since this was happening in Wembley, I guess I do understand that. The point here is that when we look back on all of the champions who weren't fully supported by WWF, the earliest example here is Macho Man Randy Savage, and he's the one who really started it all. Not only was he not main eventing WrestleMania as champion, but he didn't main event a single pay-per-view as champion. Macho's second run with the belt was always about him playing second fiddle, and while there are definitely those who say the same thing about his first title reign, let's not kid ourselves, his second one was so much worse. Well, there you go, my picks for 10 WWE champions that were never really supported by WWE, but what's your definition of support and who do you got for your list? Let me know down in the comments, and please don't forget to support this channel by making sure you're subscribed and giving it a big like. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, Dave knows.